Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, and today we have with us Guru Singh. Electric, vital, and vibrant, Guru Singh is a celebrated third generation yogi, master spiritual teacher, author, and musician who gracefully brings ancient spiritual practices and philosophies into the now with ease, humanity, humility, and a healthy dose of humor. He fuses Eastern mysticism into Western pragmatism in an accessible and transformative way. Guru Singh, it's so great to have you on the show.
Great to be back with you, even if it is at distance, right?
That's right. Interesting times we live in, for sure. So I recall when we first met. It was a decade ago, and we were on a trip together with Tony Robbins and a whole bunch of platinum partners, and we went to Jerusalem and then to Egypt. And what a fantastical trip! What a just remarkable just inspiring trip that was. And that was my first time to Israel, which is where I'm recording right now. I'm in Tel Aviv now, but in Jerusalem was where we first met. And I would love for you to kind of share with our listener how you ended up being part of Tony Robbins' inner circle, and being invited on these amazing life-changing trips to help inspire and change the lives of the folks who were in attendance.
Well, Tony and I have known each other personally since 1993. We met around a spiritual gathering at that time. And since the very beginning, he and I recognized a tremendous similarity between our paths and our aspirations. And therefore, we kept in touch. And we then got drawn back together around the whole concept of oneness and that celebration of the spiritual energy that we as human beings have the capacity to not only possess but the capacity to share with each other. We can share it through our prayers, we can share it through our meditations, we can share it through our activities. And I've been studying yoga basically since birth because I was raised by a mother and a father who were an artist and a musician and an artist, and were both yogis and followers of Swami Sri Yukteswar, who was Paramahansa Yogananda's teacher, his guru. Paramahansa Yogananda, obviously the author of Autobiography of a Yogi. Mm. So whenever Tony and I would get together or meet each other, and we got drawn back together around our mutual friendship and working relationship with His Holiness the Dalai Lama in San Francisco in 2007, which was 14 years after we had first met. And we looked at each other and we said, we have to do some things together. And so that's how it all got started. He started me working with the Platinum Partners, which were a much smaller group back in those days. Currently, it's a couple 300, but it was a cozy group. And the first time we went out, we went to Fiji and Bora Bora, and then we went to Sun Valley, and then we ended up with you and also back in Cairo. We were recalling for the listeners and viewers, Stephan and I were recalling our time in the airport, traveling from Tel Aviv to Cairo, and the delays upon delays upon delays of the charter plane that we were to get on and travel in. And so we just broke out our yoga mats and we did our yoga, and I broke out my guitar, and we had a festive time right there on the floor of the boarding area in the Tel Aviv airport. I'm sure that airport has never had quite a similar event in its history.
Yeah, so you were singing songs, and the whole group were singing with you, and you're playing the guitar. It was magical.
Yeah, those are magical things when people can gather together and have the freedom of inhibition, to be
Mm.
able to let loose and to sing and to just feel free to be themselves at any moment. And that's kind of where how you and I met, around that kind of human energy.
Yeah. Yeah. So people are so caught up with how they look, looking good, not looking bad, and you stifle yourself and your creativity and your ability to reveal light when you're so concerned about what other people think of you. I recall hearing that, I forget from who, but what other people think of you is none of your business.
Ah,
That's
that's
really
a good
profound.
one.
Yeah.
I, I always heard about that we are a slave to OPO, right? Other people's opinions.
Yeah.
And to set yourself free from that is not to disregard other people's opinions, but in a deep sense of respect, you you take your on your own opinion first, and then you let other people's opinions model it and mold it and help it. And that's how I love that. What other people think of you is none of your business.
Well, it's such a projection. It's not. It's there. There's no real basis in reality. They're watching their own movie. They're in their own theater watching the movie that they think is the real world, and you're just a projection to them that they're trying to fill in the missing information. They don't know the depth of amazingness that each of us are.
Yes, and this actually, Stephan, is the basis of most spiritual teachings, is to unmap and unconnect all of those inner relationships that we yogis call Maya, the production of Maya, the illusion.
Mm.
And unmapping and remapping and reformatting all of those inner relationships between your physical body, your emotional body, and your mental body, so that you can begin to see things not as you believe they are or as you think they are, but you can begin to perceive things as they are. And that's the purpose of everything that I teach. That's the purpose of, obviously, your podcast, is to bring people in touch with that true sense of the way things are, and to set them free,
Yeah.
to
Yeah. I
set
like
them
to.
free within that.
The way I like to think of it is I want to help people not just with their awareness, but with their awareness of their awareness.
And that's, I love that. That's very similar to what a great educational professor once said was, we don't learn, we learn how to learn. And because the information is already with us, we just have to open to that information, which is why it's called remember, recall, and recognize or recognize, is that you're just becoming aware of what's already there. And it's just like you and I here, in order for us to connect in this virtual way, our devices had to access that universal internet, right? The global internet. So the global internet is always there. And you're always where you are. I'm always where I am. When we allow ourselves to connect through that mechanism, then all of a sudden we see each other. Everyone on this podcast sees us, experiences this. And this is literally what we are in this world, is that we are opening up. We are learning to learn. We are allowing ourselves to be open to that which is always there, and is not only always there, but it's always there within us as well.
Mm,
So here we have made connection in that way. It's a beautiful. It's called an awakening, isn't it?
yes. One thing I've learned from well, there are many spiritual disciplines that I like to learn from, and two of the big ones have been oneness and Kabbalah. And specifically from Kabbalah, one thing that comes to mind when we're talking is this idea of the 99% reality. So we live in what's known as the Malhut, the physical reality, right? You got to pay your bills, and you hop on an airplane to fly somewhere, and that's very physical, very kind of real. You just, this table here that or desk is solid, but it's not actually. There's more space
Correct.
in that desk than there is solid material in terms of the atoms and the space between the subatomic particles and so forth. So
Correct.
recognizing and just being uh, cognizant that there's this 99% of the reality that we are not experiencing because it's in higher realms, higher dimensions, but knowing it's out there is um, it helps you to live more intentionally and be just more open, like not just getting stuck in the day to day, but realizing there's a much bigger picture, and we're just experiencing 1% of what is out there. If that, it's probably a fraction of 1%. So that's a pretty cool way of looking at things.
Exactly. And think of it, let's bring it home. Think of it not so much as being out. The idea of a dog whistle is that when you blow it, dogs hear it, but you don't. So it's not out there anywhere, it's right here.
Right.
And so these dimensions are not beyond the space. These dimensions are right here in front of us. The dog whistle is right there at your ear, but your ear is not able to perceive it. And
Right.
so in your metaphor of the 99% that we are unaware of, what we teach and what you've obviously brought podcast to promote in many different ways is, how can you enable yourself to become more aware, more awakened to those aspects that are in that 9%. Obviously, we'll never get the whole 99%, but any amount of it that we gain access to, that we become open to, gives us a greater understanding of everything 1%, because everything in the 1% has a relationship with the 99%. And the more you get in touch with the relationship around something, the more you understand about a person's life, what they've gone through in their life, the deeper your compassion is for them in this moment. I find that to be especially important in this particular time when there is so much diversity. And in this expanded and accelerated diversity, what ends up happening is even people that are open, very compassionate, with those who are extremely brutal and extremely malevolent. And these are what the great masters said. These are the tripwires in that conscious path, because even those people are a product of a series of events. And if we access a small portion of what you call the 99%, what the Kabbalah calls the 99%, you gain access and insight to those parts of a very ornery terror person that lets you see, I understand now how they became so malevolent. I understand how they became who they are. And so, not that you're going to condone their behavior, but you will be more effective in placing it, or even perhaps in correcting it, by understanding where it comes from. And that's a successful path.
Yeah. And to even see how their role as a malevolent force, or the malevolence that they are exuding because of their being lost or wounded, is actually serving the greater good. in some bigger picture that we can't see.
Correct. Correct. It's interesting, by the way, to expand upon what you just said. In the what were called the Dark Ages, the medieval times, right around the areas that we're in right now, there were two factions, and one was the Arabic movement, and the other was the Judeo-Christian movement. And it was around the time of Pope Gregory. And what the authorities at that time determined was that the shadows in art and the harmonic intervals that were not unison or octaves were dwelling places for the dark forces. And so that's where Gregorian chanting came in, and very two-dimensional art. And at the same time, the Arab world was inventing algebra, which is an Arabic term. They were actually learning about the human anatomy, which the Judeo-Christian world said was inappropriate for us to dissect a cadaver. And so these kinds of motions take place throughout history. It's like a pendulum, where people open up to great knowledge by exploring the unknown, and where people shut down the unknown because they fear that it's inappropriate. And what you were just saying is alike to that, in that explore all of these things that, like you say, the malevolent force in a larger picture is just like the shadow in a drawing. If all you're into is just that shadow, then it looks dismal. But if you take a step back, you see that the shadow in an art portrayal gives you perspective. And just as that malevolent person then ultimately gives you perspective in a larger picture.
Mm. Yep. Joe Polish has this funny way of saying it. He says, everybody has something to teach you, even if it's just an example to be a warning to others. So, something along those lines. Yeah. So if
I digest that statement. That's, yes. That allows us to be open 24/7.
Yeah. So I'm curious, if we were to kind of follow you from birth, what were some of the most pivotal, profound, defining moments of your earlier years? I mean, you were taught yoga since birth, as you said. I'm curious what that would have been like to have experienced childhood in that way.
Experiencing childhood through a yogic perspective was two things. It was very embracing and endearing, and extremely frightening. The frightening part of it was when, as a young child, having not developed, my full personality, being very impressionable, which is where all children are at, I would go out into the world, and the world is competitive. But I would come back at home into a world that had zero competition. It was all about compatibility. It was all about, how can I serve you? It was all about, how can I help you? And then I'd go out into the world, which was extremely competitive. And, like teachers, for example, would send notes home to my parents, because I just thought school was the greatest thing, because it was a room gathering all my friends, right? and that we were compelled to be together for an entire day, right? Every day, 5 days a week. And so I would get my work done really quickly, and then I would visit with my friends. And so the teachers would send notes home to the like, we can't get him to stop talking, and my parents would send them back and say, we can't either. And so I grew up literally working very diligently to create safety in what appeared to be very unsafe circumstances, very competitive, combative circumstances, because the true human nature, not the way we have gotten to in today's world, but the true nature of human. Hu means light and man means mind. So we're a being that has light in the mind. The true nature of a human being is to be like what you and I are. We're adding on to each other's statements rather than trying to compete for a greater statement in some way, right? Life is not a debate. You know, life is let's find someone else's opinion and let's see how that fits and sits within our world, which is going back to earlier, you saying that what somebody else thinks of you is none of your business. The idea, if you take, you know, the way other people think, and this is what I had to learn it the hard way, in direct answer to your question. My experience growing up in my very youngest years was that I had to learn it the hard way how to incorporate people's competitive and combative natures, bullying, if you will, how I could include that in my picture rather than excluding myself because it was too powerful or trying to compete with it. And it was, I learned later in life through my study that the dance that Lao Tzu talked extensively about in the Tao, that learning to dance with that opposing force, going back a couple of statements in our conversation here, learning how to dance with the opposing forces will teach you how to use their energies, not in opposition to your purpose, but as an energy that furthers your purpose.
Yep.
And so that was the earliest part of my childhood. And then, you know, come later in my life, when I was, how old was I? I was at the age of 20. I died in a hospital and of peritonitis, which was from a ruptured appendix. And I actually had no heartbeat and breath for 1 minute and 45 seconds. And during that 1 minute and 45 seconds, I traveled into, you know, space beyond space and experienced a significant structure outside of the structure that you and I were talking about, being the 1%. And I wrote about this in a book called Buried Treasures. It was an opportunity for me to really assemble what I had been working with earlier in life into what I was going to be working with later in life. So at that pivotal point, kind of that reboot, if you will, at the age of 20, I took all of what you had asked about that had taken place in early life and learned how I might be able to employ it as the rest of my life. And that's when I basically determined that my life was going to be a life of service and a life of teaching and a life of continuously seeking a higher view, a higher perspective of everything that was taking place. So those are the kind of the two modules in answer to your question. There was the life of being raised by yogis, an artist and a musician, both of which I incorporate in my teaching. Here's a little bit of the art you can see right here, because this is my virtual classroom. And there are two of my many guitars back there that you can see. And so I incorporated all of these components after this reboot moment of death to just go forward and be as free from that enslavement of the outer expectation as possible.
Wow. So
and
when
I'm
you,
sure by the times of your greatest success have been times of your greatest risk.
yes, and some of the most pivotal times in my life were the most painful, for sure. And yeah, so I went through a tough divorce 10, 11 years ago. And at the time, I was depressed and had a really hard time with it. But the gift was 3 different people telling me, seemingly just it was like the universe talking to me, telling me, you got to go to this Tony Robbins event, Unleash the Power Within, that was happening locally. And I wouldn't have gone otherwise, but 3 different people who didn't know each other within 2 weeks of each other telling me, you really need this, you need to go to this this Tony Robbins thing. And I knew nothing about him, but I signed up, and I had no idea I was going to go on a fire walk that first day. That first night, I almost chickened out, but I did it.
Right. You just said a moment ago that sometimes the most profound moments of growth are also the most painful. I mean, there it is in an actuality. I guess I would not call it a metaphor.
Yeah.
The fire walk is where you're challenging yourself to walk on hot coals, and what you feel at the end of your experience is like, wow, I can do anything.
Exactly. So it was at that moment, walking across the coals, not getting burned, and celebrating that success right afterwards, that I realized that I can, do anything. I could go and get that LASIK surgery that I had been thinking about doing, but was terrified to do. I didn't want any like eye surgery or anything. And getting that hair transplant I got 2 months after that, which has completely transformed how I look 10, 15 years younger after that transformation that I did with those different things, plus the diet changes and the exercise changes and all that. So yeah, I kind of got a reboot like you did, but I didn't have a near-death experience, thankfully, I guess. I mean, I can see from your perspective a little bit that what a gift it was, even though it must have been really, really something to go through, to have died for 1 minute and 45 seconds. I'm guessing that you look back on that, seeing that as a gift now. Is that correct?
Yes. And if we were to compare what you just described to what I just described, we'd come to the conclusion that the only difference was not in the intensity. The difference was the time that the intensity was spread out over. So you went through the death of a marriage, right? You went through the death of your fear of that LASIX. You went through the death of your hesitation by walking across the hot coals. You went through a death of one appearance to take on a younger, more vibrant appearance. You went through the death of some of the old eating habits and some of the old exercise habits. And so in all of those deaths and rebirths, they were, if you just put all those into a single moment, it would be very much like the experience that I had. So in other words, the only thing that time is a dilution of the intensity of a particular moment. And that's why I think that most people, if they really get in touch with the things that we've obviously gotten in touch with, they will discover that, oh, that's not, that book, Buried Treasures, is not just about Guru Singh. It's actually about my life too. That I have those same things happening in my world, but they're just in a different, time sequence. The time may be disintegrated. In other words, it's not all happening in one moment. The moments may be stretched out over a longer period of time, but each and every one of us goes through these kinds of events. And if we're open to recognizing or to recognizing them, we can put them into a perspective that allows us to gain the most from them, to learn the greatest lesson from them. Like, I'm sure when you were in the midst of the divorce, it was the last thing that you wanted.
That's
now
true.
you look back on it. Now you look back on it. You're in a wonderful relationship, and you look back on that and you go, "Oh, well, that was a school. That was a schooling, so that I could get ready for this what I'm in now."
Right. Yeah. And to regret, for example, being in a marriage that wasn't working for X number of years longer than it quote unquote should have been is also something that doesn't serve me, because I realize that if I would have gotten out of that marriage sooner, I would not be in this relationship, because we wouldn't have met at that time at Date with Destiny in 2012 when
Good for you.
yeah, platinum partner friend of ours, Adele, introduced us at the very end of the event.
Yeah, well, that is perfect. That is absolutely perfect. It's so, and I hope that your listeners and viewers can recognize that as you and I are discussing our lives, we're actually not talking exclusively about our lives. We're talking about how they can look at their lives and go, "Oh, wow, I'm really similar to that which these two are talking about. There's this time in my life, and there's this other time in my life, etc." Because when we can relate other people's learning to our own life, that's when we gain advantage from our relationship with other times and other people and other spaces and other circumstances.
Yep, very true. So I'd love to go a little deeper into yoga specifically and understanding what the different types of yoga are and how it's more than just a physical workout. I mean, it seems like it has been almost dumbed down to that in a lot of Western physical fitness sort of culture, but it's very profound spiritual discipline as well. And there are different types of yoga, and Kundalini yoga is the particular type or discipline of yoga that you practice and teach. And I would love for our listeners to understand, and myself to understand more about these different types.
Excellent. Well, I have a teaching aid here. And so here we have a depiction of a human body. And in this particular depiction, we have this green area down here. This is the pelvis. These are the two legs. And this is basically drawn energetically rather than anatomically. I mean, it's where the pieces are, but it's more of a showing of what are the energies of these various parts. This circular pattern here is the belly, the abdomen. And then this squiggly green line across is the diaphragm, the largest muscle in the body. Then we have the two lungs, and we have the heart. And this area of our body is energized and is, because it doesn't really move about. We can move our arms, we can move our legs, but this particular area of our body, it's not like you can shift your lungs. It's not like you can shift your heart, but we can shift the way in which they are working by the various movements that we use in our body. And so all forms of yoga use what's called asana, which means a posture. All forms of yoga use pranayama, which means breathing exercises. And all forms of yoga use mudra, which is the positions of your hands. And Kundalini yoga uses an extensive amount of mantra or sound. And as you recall, when Tony would talk about the reticular formation, which is the medulla and the pons in the back of in the primitive portion of the brain, what chanting does, what mantra does, is mantra affects that medulla and the pons, that reticular formation, because that holds your instinctual behavior patterns. All of these body parts hold certain patterns of life. They hold our belief systems. They hold our circulatory, our capacity to circulate outside is similar to our capacity to circulate inside. And digestion. Digestion takes what we connect to, let's say in the form of food, and it subtracts the waste from the nourishment, allows us to metabolize the nourishment. Metabolism is controlled through the thyroid and parathyroid gland in the neck. So all of these yogic asanas are specifically focused on these various parts of our body, using the arms and the legs to emphasize them. When you put your arm up at 60 degrees, it draws a line that passes directly through your heart center. If you put both arms up at 60 degrees, it crosses at the heart, right? These two energy, or actually not just a metaphysical sense, but the nerve lines cross through the heart. And so all of yogic posture, all of yogic breathing, all of yogic mantras, all of these things affect all of these parts of your physical body. Then your physical body develops and secretes the hormones, peptides, proteins, and lipids that produce your blood chemistry. And your blood chemistry is then analyzed in the brain, in the limbic portion of the brain, specifically the hypothalamus gland, to determine how do you feel. It happens instantaneously. The blood chemistry registers, and suddenly you're angry. Suddenly you're happy. Suddenly you fall in love. Suddenly, these things, if you slow down the time sequence, is basically the various glands and organs of your body registering through the blood into your brain. And yoga helps you to balance those signals, so that if the signals are off, you can correct them. And if the signals are spot on, you can use them. And this is the purpose of yoga. This is also the purpose of meditation, because in meditation, what you do is you allow yourself to take that, as they would say, that 30,000 foot, 300,000 foot view of all that's going on in your life and in your world. And you might use a mantra to clear the reticular or the instinctual reactions, the instinctual responses, so that you can, rather than having instinctual emotional responses, you can have intuitive emotional responses. Because the emotions are powerful. It's just how we use them that determines whether or not they're useful or disruptive. So that's kind of a thumbnail of what physical yoga does, and what the meditation process does, and what the singing and chanting process does.
So what's the
Now,
difference
you
between
said,
Kundalini and then like hot yoga that you would go into a hot yoga studio to do?
I'll answer the question by asking a question.
Okay.
What's the difference between a Lexus and a Mercedes? A
Okay.
lot of similarities.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of similarities. They both have 4 tires normally. They both have a steering wheel. They both have a throttle and a brake, an engine, seats. They have some gauges that tell you if you're going in the right way or not. And it's just the feel of the ride, basically. So whether it's vinyasa or hatha or hot or yin, whatever it is, or kundalini, you're basically in a vehicle that's going to get you to balance the whole part of your life that if you don't balance it, it will ultimately end up in an imbalanced way just because you've been influenced by the way life is unfolding, and rather than being the influence in how life, whoops, wrong color, in how life is unfolding. So we use yoga to balance all of our body, the circulatory, the respiratory, the digestive, the muscular system, the nervous system, the glandular organ system. And if we balance all of this, we become like a newborn where everything is not being influenced by the conditions around it. It's being influenced by its main purpose, which is the main purpose of physicality is to be healthy. The main purpose of emotionality is to be joyful. The main purpose of mentality is to be knowledgeable. And the main purpose of spirituality is to be free. Doing yoga makes those main purposes easier to accomplish.
Gotcha. And do you have
Some people like the Lexus, others like the Mercedes. Some people like hot yoga, others like Kundalini yoga. It's a matter of taste, in my estimation.
Okay. Do you think that a trip up a mountain and going into a cave for a period of time is something that is going to be helpful for our listener? Was that ever something that you did?
Yes. Yes. If they read my book, Buried Treasures, I spent some time with an indigenous village in the way back out of the way, what's called a uncontacted village, a village of indigenous people that had no relationship with the outside world. And that was like going to a cave. I mean, I went into a cave with them, but that's very helpful. It's not always very able. People aren't always able to do that. And so my suggestion is that if you have that opportunity, take it. But until you have that opportunity, take the opportunity that you have every day and go into the cave of time. Take a few moments, take several minutes to be just by yourself. Be by yourself in a space that is going to be uninterrupted by any kind of device, any kind of outside communication. And that's a reboot, as I used the term previously. That can be a small reboot that will help you through the rest of your day. You do it again the next day, and you get even greater perspective. You do it again the next day, you get greater perspective. It's what we call in Sanskrit sadhana, sadhana, sadhana. And what sadhana is just a daily practice. Every one of us has a daily practice. Well, most of us have a daily practice of breakfast. Where does the word breakfast come from? It comes from breaking the fast of not eating throughout the night. If you were to have an additional practice, you have a practice of breakfast, you have a practice of showering or bathing, you have a practice of eliminating your waste, you have all of these daily routines. If you want to get to a more maximized state, add a routine of some kind of yogic physical activity and a meditative prayerful practice. They become extremely helpful in creating as I showed earlier, a balance in your life physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually.
What kind of prayer rituals or practices do you incorporate into your daily life?
I do chanting, which clears the brain so that you can sit in silence.
Mm-hmm. For how long?
I usually chant for about, well, depending upon the day and the amount of time that I have in a day, I'll chant between 10 and 30 minutes. I mean, some days I've chanted longer, but I'm talking about what's normal for me. Mm-hmm. And then in order to get my body into a balanced state, not only for the activities of the day, but also just activity of sitting in silence and not twitching and itching and whatever. I do a good 30 minutes of yoga. So if I chant and do yoga, then I can sit in an exploratory way in meditation. Meditation is like taking contemplation and slowing it down even more. You literally go into, if you measure it in the brain, you literally go into what's called a theta state, which is the dream state in the brain. And when you enter that theta state, while you're still conscious, this is what is also known as lucid dreaming. And many great brains, Einstein, Tesla, Thomas Edison, many, Leonardo da Vinci, many great brain powers. Let me talk about some women. Mother Teresa, Madame Curie, many intelligent and great brain powers used dream sequencing or lucid dreaming, or as I'm calling it, deep theta brain meditation, to view their world from that 30,000, 300,000 foot level. So that their world isn't just a jumble of the parts, but is a picture of the whole. So it's a holistic view of life. So I do yoga to get my body in shape. I do chanting to get my psycho-emotional system in shape. And then I sit in and come into this deep, contemplative, meditative theta state. And that's my daily routine.
Oh, you know, that when you were talking about chanting, that reminds me of a particular time we were chanting, my wife and I. She wasn't my wife yet then, but we were at the Oneness Temple outside of Chennai.
Yes.
We were chanting for it was like 49 minutes or 53 minutes. I can't remember. It's one or the other. Does 53 have a particular significance, or 49? I maybe it
Well,
was
they
51.
both do in the oneness tradition, just like the difference between cars. I'm talking the oneness tradition. In the Kundalini tradition, the number of minutes are based on the way the ancient yogis would time themselves, because there were no clocks in those days. And they would time themselves by numbers of breaths And they would also time themselves by numbers of heartbeats, right? They would, average out the heartbeat and numbers of heartbeats. And so the Kundalini numbers are 11, 31, 62 as far as the number of minutes. In the oneness tradition, I remember they were both those numbers, 49 and 53.
Okay. Well, it was one or the other. And we kept saying over and over again, I'm existence, consciousness, bliss. I'm existence, consciousness, bliss. I am existence, consciousness, bliss. And you would think that it would get boring doing this for 53 minutes nonstop. But it ended up being incredibly profound. And in fact,
Yes.
my wife had an out-of-body experience.
There you go.
It was amazing. Like she ended up in like seeing from the point of view of a stray dog out on the campus, what that dog was thinking and experiencing. Then she went up to the, floated up to the top of the temple, and there were monkeys up there. And yes, there were actually monkeys hanging up on that temple. And she understood that this one monkey thought that he was the king of the world.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
How many monkeys, and I'm not talking about actual monkeys, but human monkeys, think they're the king of the world?
That's great. Yeah, pretty cool.
So what you're talking about is called, in Sanskrit, is called nam, or words, right? Names.
Mm-hmm.
Simran, which means repetition. And when you take a phrase, a short phrase or a longer phrase, and you continuously repeat it, what it does to the brain, which is very two-dimensional, right, wrong, good, bad, yes, no, it's measuring left, right, up, down. It's the brain in our head is constantly measuring. And what we want to do is we want to take it out of that comparative measuring attitude and get it into the exploring, curious, revelatory kind of attitude. And one of the ways of doing that is by giving it a task, which it goes, man, this is going to be so boring. And you don't release it from that task. You keep it doing that, keep it saying that over, and existence, consciousness, bliss, existence, consciousness, bliss, over and over and over. And pretty soon the brain goes, okay, you guys are too much, I'm out of here. And that's exactly what you want it to do, because the moment the two-dimensional analytical brain in your head goes, I'm out of here, suddenly the neurology in your heart center and the neurology in your gut center, which is the three brains of your system, suddenly open up. And now, instead of seeing things in a comparative, back to my original statement, instead of seeing things in a comparative and combative way, you see things in a connective, nourishing way, in a circulating, breathing, kind of life-giving kind of way. And you still get a balance of the analysis, but the analysis of your head brain is not dominating. And when you get this balanced view, that is what is yoga. Yoga means union, or to unite. And when you're able to experience, like your wife, it was so beautiful, experiencing it through the eyes of others. Imagine being able to see what another person is seeing. Let's just say that you're in communication with someone who you work with, someone that you have to live around or be around, and there's always something that is in conflict. Doing what your wife had an experience of doing, and suddenly seeing it through the eyes of another, the world through the eyes of another. My God, now you have the ability to not only see it as they see it, but to also allow them to see you as you are. And you can create that relationship. It's called coherence. And when there is that coherence, suddenly now there's a true relationship. As opposed to what I always use the expression, you want to be in a relationship, not a relation canoe. Because in a relationship, both of you can stand up. But in a canoe, if anyone stands up, it capsizes.
Right, right. Oh, this is good stuff, and we're coming close to time here. I want to kind of switch to a bit of a lightning round for the last few minutes. Let's start with Yogananda. So Yogananda had this amazing book, Autobiography of a Yogi, which I understand it was the only book that Steve Jobs would hand out to all his visitors, like personal visitors. And so it was a profound book for him, profound book for many, many, many people. I have not read it. I've been to the spiritual realization center. What is it called?
Self-realization.
Self-realization center in Pacific Palisades. Beautiful,
Yes, the
beautiful
Lake
place.
Shrine.
Yes, Lake Shrine Temple there. Really cool. And I've seen the Awake documentary, which was fabulous, about Yogananda. It was on Netflix, I think. Might still be on Netflix.
Some close friends of mine created that.
Oh, right. So what would you want to share, like, as a quick little tidbit for our listener or viewer about Yogananda that would pique their interest and get them wanting to dig deeper?
Yogananda had the innocence. He had tremendous innocence. And in that innocence, he is able to relate the way a person feels almost childlike. When you read his books, you're seeing the world as a child sees it, with innocence and curiosity.
Hmm.
And that's what I found to be most compelling. His teacher, Sri Yukteswar, as described by both my ancestors, because they were students of his, and also as described by Yogananda, was a very pragmatic type of yogi, which I think is very appealing in the world today. And in that pragmatism, what in Sanskrit is called grihastha, is the ability to be highly enlightened, highly awake, and very practical. Mm-hmm. To own property, to have a business, to have a family, not to have to go into seclusion in order to maintain your awareness. And that is the combination of Sri Yukteswar and Paramahansa is what I find most compelling about that particular lineage. And then you have the Kundalini lineage, which goes back through what are known as the Nihang Sikhs and the Udasi yogis. And that lineage, the Sri Yukteswar Yogananda lineage, came out of Northeast India. And the lineage that I also follow, because I follow them both, came out of Northwestern India, which is home to the Khyber Pass and all of the invasions that came into India, right? The Russians invaded, the Greeks invaded, the British invaded, all of the invasions that came in. And so the yoga that was coming out of the northwestern portion of India was not only the sage of what we were just describing, and not only the practicality of Grihastha, the sage of Yogananda, the practicality of Grihastha, of Sri Yukteswar, but also the warrior class. Think about, when you with Tony had a brilliant business mind. He had a tremendous intellectual sage consciousness, and he was a warrior. Walking across those hot coals, those burning coals, required the attitude of a warrior.
Yes.
And if you link those parts inside of you, the various lineages inside of you, the lineages of the warrior class, which is Kundalini yoga, the lineages of the business class, which is not only it's Kundalini and it's Hatha and it's all of this with that practicality, the Grishta ashram, and then the lineage of the very saintly sage, the euphoric sensations, which is also contained within all of these paths. That's a balanced approach to life.
Yes. Wow. Okay. So how do we get our listener to learn more and to kind of deep dive into Kundalini yoga and learn from you? Like, you must have a set of courses and programs and so forth. So where should we send them?
Well, we have a 16-hour course that's the next one is starting in less than a month. It's another one starting in March, and then there'll be another one starting next August. That's a 16-week, 200-hour deep dive into Kundalini yoga. And when you graduate from that course, you're certified through an international certification system called Yoga Alliance. And also, and that's through kundaliniuniversity.com. You can also access all of this through gurusingh.com. And also we have for, the less intense, we have classes on the platform, Kundalini University Foundation, also accessed through those two same websites. And you can find weekly schedules of classes on meditation, on yoga. We're going to end up having an app in the near future that sort of associates all of this together, right? Where you can just go to one-stop shop and, do I want to meditate? Do I want to do a yoga class? Do I want to take a 200-hour course, and do it all right there out of your pocket computer, smartphone. So we are up and running in the digital age and available to everyone globally. Awesome.
Well, this has been fabulous. Guru Singh, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you. I've really appreciated you from the moment that I've met you. I'm really happy to have had the opportunity to share you with my tribe, and I hope that my listener now will take some further action and go deeper with you. And thank you again.
Thank you, and congratulations. Just take a moment. Congratulations on finding the love of your life through the risks that you took that entered you into the things that put you both together. I'm just, what a romance that is. God bless you.
Yeah, thank you. It really is such an incredible blessing. And it wasn't until that moment that I surrendered to the universe, to the creator, that she showed up. It was when I prayed for her 12 hours before we met. It was the last minute I was working on my poster board for Date with Destiny, doing my relationship vision, writing that up, who I would be and what the relationship would be like and everything. And then we were mutually introduced 12 hours. Oh, and I prayed for her, prayed to the creator, to my divine, for her to show up while I was writing up that relationship vision on the poster board.
Wow. What a great success story. Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you, Guru Singh.
Thank you. And God bless you, all of you who listened and view this incredible man and all that he's dedicated his life for.
Oh, thank you so much.